My name is Jessica, and I married my husband, Jack, 5 months ago. We live near his family's home. Jack has a fraternal twin sister named Emma, and they are very close, so close that it sometimes surprises people around them. At our wedding, Emma cried more than I did, which caught everyone's attention. Emma is very expressive with her emotions, but in a way that's a bit different. She often says she's straightforward, but I find that people who claim to be so are usually not. Emma often makes blunt remarks, using her straightforwardness as an excuse. She tends to dominate conversations, and she's a prime example of someone who hides behind the idea of being direct. Even though we're family, Jack and I naturally resolve our disagreements, but as a wife, I sometimes feel like an outsider. Fights can lead to serious issues like divorce, so Emma often tells me, "If you ever have trouble with Jack, don't hesitate to talk to me. I'm straightforward, and as his twin sister, I know him well and can give you the best advice." She says this every time we meet. Every weekend, Emma comes over to our house and stays late into the night. Sometimes, she drinks too much and ends up spending the night. During these times, my husband apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry. My sister is still single and feels lonely because I got married first. She'll settle down when she finds someone. I'm really sorry." But despite his apologies, I can't feel his sincerity, and my irritation grows. Emma doesn't hesitate to visit. She often makes comments like, "Hey Jessica, you're really petite, aren't you? My brother and I are about the same height. Every time I see you, I think about how small you are. Petite women are attractive, aren't they? I was even scouted to be a model once. I really admire small women. And people say twins have a telepathic connection, right? It's true, I always know what my brother is thinking, and I know his type of girl. So, I was surprised when I heard he chose you." Emma likes to make herself seem superior with these remarks, but I know why she visits so often. A mutual friend told me some things about her, and I feel a bit sorry for her. So, no matter how harsh Emma's comments are, I try not to bring it up. However, she once said, "Hey Jessica, you used to live in an old wooden apartment, right? That must have been tough. Are you small because of malnutrition? My brother and I grew up well because our family was financially comfortable. Did you marry my brother because of our family's money? I really feel sorry for you. After all, you and my brother aren't a good match, but it's not your fault. Growing up poor is tough, and it shows in you." Hearing that, I finally lost my patience. I was already tired of her repeated rude remarks, and I couldn't stand the insults to my family anymore. I can't take it anymore. How can you insult someone's family like this? Are you saying I'm small because I'm poor and malnourished? Emma was shocked by my reaction and got angry, but I couldn't hold back anymore. Are you upset that I married your brother? If that's the case, just say it directly instead of beating around the bush. I heard your boyfriend recently broke up with you. The man you liked is getting married to someone very different from you. Are you staying away from her because you still have some self-control? I bet you don't like me because I remind you of her. What are you talking about? Emma stammered. I know everything. You compare her to me and dislike me even more. You always say you're straightforward, but you're more sneaky than anyone else. Please leave now and don't come back. Anyone who insults me and my family isn't welcome in this house. What are you saying? Why are you talking like this? I'm going to tell my brother. Please go ahead. Feel free. You're awful, the worst, Emma shouted, leaving in a fury, her face red with anger. It was just as someone had told me. Emma often says she's tough and has many male friends. She has a close male friend she goes out with for dinner, movies, or drinks. Sometimes, if she misses the last train, she stays over at his place. The nature of their relationship is unclear, but Emma often jokes at parties, "If I don't find a boyfriend, I might marry him." We sometimes talk about getting married if neither of us finds someone else. I don't see him as a romantic partner, but I think we could spend our old age together because we've known each other for so long. The true feelings of her male friend are unclear, but he just nodded when Emma said she had no romantic interest in him. However, her affection for him was obvious, especially when an attractive woman was around. Emma would try to keep him away from other women at parties, staying close to him, and never leaving his side. It was clear that Emma was actually in love with him, but it seemed he didn't feel the same way. He often dismissed her, and a mutual friend told me that's why he secretly announced his engagement and distanced himself from Emma. Maybe he never really liked her and felt relieved to put some space between them. Honestly, I have mixed feelings about Emma. Even though I don't always like her, I can't help but feel sorry for her as a woman. I've tried several times to stand up to her sarcastic remarks and quiet her down, but I always felt it was unfair to criticize her too harshly, and I didn't want to seem like I was flaunting my status as a married woman. But her thoughtless actions pushed me too far, and I ended up getting emotional. I feel like I lowered myself by reacting that way. I don't regret it, but I do feel uneasy about it. I wonder how my husband will react. He values his family, so I hope he understands how I feel. When he comes home, I plan to tell him everything. That night, my husband came home with my sister-in-law, and he was furious. "What have you done? I heard you said awful things to my sister," and mocked her. Hearing his angry voice, I was more confused than surprised. It seemed my sister-in-law had twisted the story when she told him. "Look, my sister's crying. It must be serious if my usually tough and bold sister is in tears. Apologize to her." Behind him, my sister-in-law was holding a handkerchief to her face. "Wait a minute. Won't you listen to my side of the story? Do you know she insulted my parents? Haven't you heard about that?" "My sister would never do such a thing," my husband said, refusing to listen. Seeing my sister-in-law smirking behind him made my anger flare up again. "I don't know exactly how your sister put it, but I've been dealing with her sarcasm for a long time. I've told you about it many times, but you never really listened. Your sister said we were poor and badly raised, and she even accused me of marrying you for money." "What?" "Yes, my family was poor, but I never felt ashamed of it. My parents worked hard to raise me without hardship. I'm not interested in your family's wealth, and your sister was the one who started using foul language. I could put up with her sarcasm until now, but when she insulted my parents, I couldn't forgive her." "Wouldn't you get angry if someone insulted your parents?" My husband went silent for a moment and looked at his sister. My sister-in-law then covered her face with a handkerchief and started crying loudly. "Sister-in-law, why don't you wipe your tears and tell us the truth? You always say you're so straightforward," I suggested, and my husband's eyes suddenly widened. "Don't joke. I can't believe my sister would be so nasty. Besides, it's true your family is financially struggling, isn't it? What's so bad about telling the truth?" my husband shouted. At those words, I felt a wave of shock. "Do you really think that?" I should have listened to my sister's advice. I should have understood when she said people from poor families have bad upbringings and should be avoided. She was right. What are you trying to do? Degrade my sister? Have you thought that way all along?
Yes.
Your cooking tastes poor, and over time, I felt our standards of living are different. But your attitude now has made up my mind. I can't stay with you any longer. Ultimately, I can't get along with poor people. I'll pay the alimony, so please leave. Go back to that old house of yours," he said, with a smirk on his face that matched my sister-in-law's. I no longer had the energy to argue. "Understood. I'll leave," I said, packing my things into a bag and walking to the door without making eye contact with them. As I was about to leave, my sister-in-law said, "This settles it. Like I've always said, you can make up with family no matter the fight, but it's impossible with outsiders. You really are pitiful. At least try to live happily in that old house with your family," she whispered. I glanced briefly at her and quietly left the room. My father is a skilled carpenter, but his talent didn't translate into business success. My mother worked part-time to support the family. We weren't wealthy, but we never struggled to live. I had believed that my husband had chosen me knowing all about my background. I thought that if I talked things over with my sister-in-law, she would understand. But reality was different. I was faced with a strong bond between the twins, and the most painful part was realizing that my husband actually looked down on me. He insulted the cooking my mother taught me, calling it poor, and I realized he never truly loved me. As soon as I left the house, I called my parents. The moment I heard my mom's voice, I couldn't stop crying. I tried to explain the situation to her through my sobs. She was surprised and concerned. I'm sorry, Mom, but I couldn't stand them insulting you and Dad. You sent me off hoping for my happiness. After I told her everything, my mom sighed deeply and said, I'm coming there now, and your father is coming with me. I appreciate it, I replied. We're coming by car. Your father hasn't been driving much lately, but we'll be fine. Just stay put, okay? Thank you, I said. My parents' house was about a 20-minute drive away. As I waited at the entrance, my sister-in-law suddenly stuck her head out of the window and said, Are you still here? That's creepy. Maybe your house is gone. Was it demolished? Jack, Jessica is still here. Come take a look. My husband also appeared at the window and said, Are you really still here? What are you trying to prove? It's pointless to apologize now. My decision won't change. Oh, do you need money? That's too bad. He then threw a $15 bill at me. Take a taxi and leave quickly. If you stay here any longer, I'll call the police, okay? If your family gets into trouble, it'll only make your situation worse, he taunted. At that moment, a black car approached, catching their attention. Wow. Who could that be? A politician or something, they wondered. The car stopped right in front of me, and the door quietly opened. Miss, your ride is here, the driver said as I handed him my luggage. The window of the back seat quietly rolled down, revealing my parents. When they saw my father, Jack and Emma looked shocked. Jack, Emma, it's been a long time, my father said. Behind him, I could see my mother's face. My daughter has been staying with you, and we appreciate it. Since this is a residential area, we can't park for long. We have something to discuss. So, could you please join us in the car? Emma, you're welcome to join us too. Your parents are welcome to join us too, my father said, as my husband and sister-in-law stood speechless. My father got out of the car and invited them again. How about joining us? Drawn by my father's commanding presence, they hesitantly got into the car. This is my first time in a luxury Rolls-Royce. It's impressive, my husband said, trying to smile despite being overwhelmed. We could have taken another car, but I haven't been driving much lately, and my wife was concerned, my father explained. I'm not sure what this is about, but where are we going? My husband asked. To our family home. I'd like to have a thorough discussion with you and your sister. Your house? I don't understand. And why this car? My husband replied, confused. You might be wondering why ordinary people like us are in such a luxurious car, my father said, his intense gaze making them uneasy. As we arrived at our destination and stepped out of the car, they were stunned by the large gate in front of us. What? Where is this? My husband stammered. This is my family home. The wedding was small and only included close family, so you haven't met my father, Jessica's grandfather. I wanted you to meet him today, but unfortunately, he's been hospitalized recently. I'm sorry I couldn't introduce him, my father explained. As the gate slowly opened and we moved forward, my husband and sister-in-law followed closely, still in shock. When we entered the house, they froze in surprise. Please have a seat, my father urged, and they sat down, looking around the house with astonished expressions. What is this? What about the car we just got out of? Is this some kind of prank? Whose house is this? Surely, we didn't enter without permission? My husband asked, still bewildered. You ask an interesting question. This is my family home, my father replied. That can't be true. When we came to visit before the wedding, it was just an old wooden house. Please stop joking, my husband insisted. At my father's signal, a maid placed business cards in front of them. A carpenter with a business card? My husband muttered in confusion, reading the card. Peterson Trading, the famous corporation? That card belongs to my grandfather. He is the chairman of that company, I explained. My mother added, my husband is also an executive at the same company. Really? My husband asked, now completely taken aback. Not only that, but our family has been landowners for generations. Many of the lands around here are owned by my grandfather, I continued. Really? Then why did he choose to be a carpenter and live in such an old apartment? My husband asked, still trying to make sense of it all. My father resisted taking over the family business and chose to be a carpenter in his youth as a form of rebellion. Since Jessica was born, He has reconciled with my grandfather and has been supporting our lifestyle, my mother explained. We enjoy family trips abroad, once a month. My mother's family owns a famous dress shop that's known internationally. In their youth, they were inspired by a song to live this kind of lifestyle. By the way, do you remember in middle school when you almost missed the school trip because you overslept? My grandfather sent me to the location by rotorcraft when I was desperate. I ended up arriving before the buses, and my classmates were really surprised. It's true I used to live in an old wooden apartment, but on weekends, I stayed at my grandfather's large house with my family. We celebrated special occasions like birthdays there, so it felt like I had two homes, which I really enjoyed. Why have you kept quiet for so long? Wait, Jessica's maiden name doesn't match her grandfather's last name, they said, accusing me of lying. All our family could do was sigh at their shouting. Just 20 minutes after being kicked out by my husband, there's no way a house and car could be prepared so quickly, they argued. No one would create such a huge lie just because they were insulted. When we first got married, my husband moved into my family home because of a conflict with his own. But my brother and his wife took over our family home, and my husband was supposed to succeed his father as chairman. As my mother explained, my husband grimaced, gripping the business card tightly. Jessica, why did you keep this a secret? If you had known, would you have treated me any better? I asked. They turned away and fell silent. If you're wondering why I kept it hidden, it's because I didn't want to make our family background public. I'm tired of people judging others by their family status, and my parents feel the same way, so I agreed with them. But I couldn't stay silent when my daughter was insulted, my father said. My father, Jessica's grandfather, loves her very much, and if he were here now, I wonder how he would have reacted. A photo of my grandfather hung behind my father, as if he were watching my husband and sister-in-law's behavior. By the way, the company your father works for is actually a subsidiary of ours. Did you know that? My father revealed. The expressions on my husband and sister-in-law's faces suddenly turned pale. I actually wanted to meet your parents today, but are they at home? Yes, they are, I believe, my husband stammered. They're on a trip right now, my sister-in-law quickly added. Their flustered behavior made it clear they were lying, but my father just laughed at the absurdity of it all. Understood, then. It can't be helped, he said with a smile. Let's have a thorough discussion about the way you treated my daughter and whether your parents share the same views, my father said. Is this really necessary? Why do you need to confirm such things? My husband asked, sounding defensive. My daughter wants to come back home. She asked us to come and get her. My father replied. Are you saying she should get divorced? Weren't you the one who suggested that? My husband asked, turning to me. I could only nod under his gaze. Wait a minute. Being called here out of the blue, finding out about your wealth, and now being pushed towards divorce, this is all too much. If we had known, this wouldn't have happened, my husband stammered. So, what are you trying to say? What would you have done if you knew about my family's background? I realized I had put up with my sister-in-law's words because I still cared for my husband. But today, seeing his true nature, that affection quickly faded. After hearing him ridicule my parents, I knew I couldn't stay with him anymore. I was disappointed that he judged people based on their family background. You and your sister said today that poor people should go back to their old homes. That's not something I can accept. Yes, I want a divorce, I said firmly. I want a divorce too, my husband responded. Wait, that was just a joke. I didn't mean it seriously, he tried to backtrack. But didn't you say yourself that you feel the difference in our living standards every day? And you called the traditional flavors poor. Even if it was a joke, I can't live with someone who makes such remarks, I replied. The divorce is mutually agreed upon. If you start fresh with someone who shares your lifestyle, everything will be resolved, right? My father added. That's so. Let's discuss this again with your parents. For now, you may leave, my father said, as the maid tried to guide my husband and sister-in-law out. But my husband refused and yelled, This is no joke. What are you saying? Weren't you the ones laughing at us behind the scenes? He was visibly angry, his face turning red. My sister-in-law chimed in. Exactly. Pretending to be a poor carpenter, but actually being wealthy? Did you call us here to trap us? What is this? A recreation of an old drama. I don't believe any of this. Is this really a real house? Or is it some kind of set? Are all these staff hired actors? She was yelling just as loudly as my husband. Calm down first, my father said, trying to soothe my husband. But as my husband jerked away, his arm accidentally knocked over a vase, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound startled everyone, and the maids quickly rushed to the broken pieces, their faces turning pale. Why are you so surprised? It's just a vase. Probably something from a dollar store, my husband said loudly, looking down at the maids as they gathered the shattered pieces. Seeing this, my father sighed and picked up a piece of the debris. You said you would pay alimony to proceed with the divorce, but can you afford the cost of this vase? He asked. My husband looked shocked. What? It's worth $150,000. My great-grandfather had it made by a famous artist. It's irreplaceable, my father explained. Then he asked again, did you tell my daughter you would pay alimony? Under my father's sharp gaze, my husband's face went from pale to stark white. Wait, it was my brother who broke it. This has nothing to do with me. I didn't even touch the vase, my sister-in-law protested, but no one responded to her. Desperate, she clung to my arm. See, it has nothing to do with me, right? Why are you angry at me? I think I'm being misunderstood. I'm the type who says what's on my mind right away, and if that's why you're upset, I sincerely apologize. I'll change, okay? While calming her trembling arm, I looked directly into her eyes. People who claim to be straightforward don't run away or dodge issues. You can't use that as an excuse. Unfortunately, a small action has turned into a big problem, I said. My sister-in-law was left speechless, her eyes wide with shock. Can we take a moment? I can't keep up with all this. We're still a married couple, right? So let's go home and talk this over, my husband suggested, but I felt no sympathy for him. Do you remember when you broke your grandfather's valuable ashtray as a child? I asked. Yes, that ashtray was worth $100,000, and I was completely helpless when I apologized, he admitted. Yes, but grandfather forgave you right away and never asked for compensation, I reminded him. Hearing this, my husband and sister-in-law's expressions softened a bit. However, I stood in front of them and repeated the words they needed to hear. Family relationships can be mended, but once there's a breakdown between a married couple, it's hard to repair. This is something I learned from you twins. I said this, and their faces turned pale again. After that, our divorce was officially finalized. My in-laws didn't say anything during the process and stopped all support for the twins. They agreed to pay for the vase, which saved my father-in-law from losing his job and my mother-in-law from social isolation. I never knew my grandfather was so highly respected. I heard that my ex-husband and sister-in-law are secretly working night jobs to pay for the vase. The twins, who used to be very close, had a big fight over the compensation, and now they don't even speak to each other. My father continues to work hard as always, and my mother keeps supporting him. Because of this incident, I caused a lot of trouble for my parents and grandfather, so I sincerely reflect on this and plan to live more humbly from now on.